class, we're ready to officially start, so thank you for coming and thank you for mostly being on time. Today we're doing something and learning about maintaining and handling our tools in our workshop, okay? Most of you are all over this, but we'll just go through. Always we look for things to be safe, don't we, in the workplace. Have our safety glasses, our steel cut boots. I'm very strict about steel cut boots because of work health and safety responsibilities and also liabilities. We can be liable as a teacher if I don't see you wearing your right protective clothing. Hearing protection, we've talked about that many times, and so on. Okay. So, we always have to use the right tool for the job. How many times have I seen someone in a workshop, the screwdriver in one hand and hammer in the other hand, and doing what they can to undo a nut that wouldn't undo? But we use the right tools. Sometimes we get bolts, right, that are a little bit loose, the spanner's a bit loose. Maybe the spanner's poor quality. We want to try and have a toolbox of reasonably good quality tools, don't we? Ones that will last. Those open-enders will open a little bit as we're using them if they're a cheap type of tool, so we want to make sure we've got good tools. Talks about, what have we got here? Extensions of socket bars, meaning if we put a long bar on a socket bar to undo a really tight nut, we won't get any warranty on that socket, or we won't get any warranty on that bar if it breaks. But if we break ourselves, well, we'll know about it. So there's suggesting that we don't do that. If we're going to undo a nut, it's best to undo a tight nut at 90 degrees. It's best for your body, for your back and everything. If you go around like this and try, you sort of, it's not so good for your body. So be sensible how we use the tools, how we use it properly to help leave it in a way that's not going to strain our body more than it needs to. And just be sure to use the tools as the purpose to be used. Why aren't you changing? There we go. So again, there's different types of tools. We've got flare nut tools. Who knows what a flare nut tool is? For undoing pipes, you've seen those, where they've got like a little opening, a little gap in them where you can come in and then it's a hex and you lock in. I find if you don't have those and you're trying to undo a union nut, invariably you round off that union nut. So just to be aware of those sort of things that are available. And I talked about this, about 90 degree pulling on the spanner, so you've covered that. Oil filters, there's a varying degree of different oil filter tools, as we all know. And when we do up an oil filter, who uses a tool to do up an oil filter? I'm talking about a spin-on cartridge, not cartridge, a spin-on metal type oil filter. Sometimes people are tempted to come in. Thank you. Oh, you got the shirt. Cool. Sometimes people are tempted to use the oil filter tool to really tighten up an oil filter. We never ever do that, okay? We only ever hand tighten an oil filter with a hand. We undo it with a tool, but as we tighten it, we go a little bit tighter, just a little bit tighter to make it tight, but we don't go over tight. We also put oil on the seal so that we can lubricate that as the rubber is tightening up. It won't bind, and then if it binds up, it could actually kink and then leak, so we don't want that. And when we do fill up the car with oil and we do fill up the oil filter by starting the engine, we always put our finger, or I do, put my finger under the filter while the car's running, make sure there's no leaks. It's a thing I want to drum into you, because how many times have I heard customers come to my workshop because their previous workshop put an oil filter on and it leaked, okay? Customers do not appreciate it when the job's not done properly. Our job is to make sure it is done properly by rechecking things, okay? Tension wrench or torque wrench. I used to call them tension wrenches. That's why I'm still getting that habit, but most of the textbooks as that will call it a torque wrench. Torque wrench is so that you can get the right tension. We have a look in our specifications. Cylinder head bolts are a good one for tightening up. What about wheel nuts? Do we tension up wheel nuts?
Yeah.
We do? Everyone does that?
Yeah.
Back in my early days, we didn't do that so much, but it's been drummed into us now to do that because of distortion, particularly on disc brakes. If they're not tensioned properly, we get distortion with a bit of heat, and they can get run out on the disc rotors, so we do use tension wrench. There are things, and I believe in my presentation we will talk about it, but I don't use them, are called torque bars. Torque bars are what goes onto your impact gun when you tighten up a wheel nut, and it's supposed to just have enough twist in it to allow a certain tension on the wheel nuts. But I've tested those and they don't work. I don't like them. Better than nothing, I suppose, but I don't like them. Who uses shifting spanners, adjustable spanners? Anyone? Who's got them in their toolboxes? How often do you use them? Sometimes?
Wheel alignment.
Wheel alignment, yeah. They've got their limitations, okay, in my books. They get a fair bit of movement in the jaw because they're adjustable. And if you've got something really tight that you can't undo and you're trying to use a shifting spanner, you can actually slip and it can come off, or it can round off the nut. So you have to be very careful. Only use them when you have to. There's different names for shifting spanners. Okay, some people call them shifting spanners, some people call them shifters, some people call them crescents. Have you ever heard of the word crescent?
No.
Yeah, the older generation would call them a crescent, and that's a weird name, I know, but that's what they call them. There's a right way and a wrong way to use them. Are you aware of that? You can only use them going this way when you're moving it to do it up. That one's been tightened by that direction. But if you were to use it the other way, because you get that movement in the crescent or the shifter, it's more prone to come off the nut or round the nut off. So always use it the right way, okay? The other problem is that is the weakest part. That's the weakest part because that's the smallest part. And by using it the wrong way, you're putting a lot of stress on that weak part if you're going in that direction. So if you're going in that direction, all the force is there. If you're going in the right direction, all the force is in that solid part of the shifter, okay? So that's why we use it the right way. There will be a question in your assessment about that, so just keep that in mind. Different types of tools for undoing certain bolts. We all know what an Allen key is. We should all know what a torque, he calls it a torque wrench. I hate the word wrench. I feel like that's what the Americans call them. I like to call them spanners. Or if that's an Allen key, wouldn't that be a torque key? I don't know. But anyhow, torque wrench is what they call it. And torque bits and torque sockets. So yeah, there's all those that you're probably all familiar with. There's also those security sockets that have that little pin. Who's seen those little pins in the sockets? Have you seen those? Yeah. They're annoying, aren't they? But they're there. Okay. All right. So some of the different types of heads that we use. What's a posi drive? It's a weird thing. I haven't seen that. Have you?
What's your favourite?
Posi drive.
Pussy.
I've said a joke without knowing it. What have I said? So yeah, we're pretty familiar with all that. There's all these different pliers. Everyone does tight bolts with pliers, or rounded off head bolts with pliers. You did.
One time.
Come here. One time. Never again. No, you learned a lesson. Pliers will make it worse. Sometimes though, sometimes I do use vice grips that lock. They lock and they're solid, and sometimes you've got no choice but to use a pair of vice grips. But even that sometimes won't undo a really tight or stubborn bolt. But other than a vice grip, never ever use any of these other tools other than what they're purposed for. They're not purposed for undoing bolts, okay? Alright. Oh, quick. There we go. Different types of hammers. This is probably the hammer most of us would have in their toolbox. Is that correct? Yeah. Who has a claw hammer in their toolbox? A carpenter's hammer. You did. Double. But those hammers are balanced, so we can use them in the auto industry for, they're much more practical for what we use them for. A carpenter's hammer has a roundish type of face, whereas this has got a flat face, less likely to slip off something that we're hitting. Okay. Sometimes we'll use a copper head hammer. That chair broke on you. Did you go to sleep? What the Is it you okay? Okay, we'll all wake up now. Now, yeah, we've got those. Why have we got brass heads for? What do you think that's for?
So that we don't damage the metal.
Exactly. They're soft, aren't they? Because they're a soft end on the hammer, it's going to mushroom and indent the hammer, but not what we're hitting. We might have a spline that we're hammering out, so a gearbox spline that's in a bearing we're using. We're not going to use our steel hammer because we'll damage the spline, and then we try to put the tail shaft yoke or whatever slides into that spline in, and it's not going to slide in properly or not going to be free. Sometimes we've got nylon ends that are on our hammers. They're okay too. This is probably a bit more for heavy duty. Nylon would be for more lighter things. I've never seen one of those hammers in my toolbox, I don't know. And unless you're a pedal beater, I doubt you see one of those either in your toolbox. But mainly that ballpoint. I call them a ballpoint hammer or an engineer's hammer, a couple of different names. Okay. And punches, there's different types, centre punching, parallel punches, long pointed punches. So yeah, just different punches. We've also got different files. We've got a coarse file, a bastard. Here's a bastard. We have a bastard file, we have a second cut file, we have a smooth file. I happen to know in the assessment there's a question about files, okay? So it's about which is not a file. And if you look at what is a file name, you'll work out which one's not the file name that's in there, because it's a bit of a trick question, I guess, but just to be aware of that, okay? And it should be in your book, in your mechanics book. Who has seen a file that's got a point on the end? You know, at the end of the file, there's a bit of a tapered point at the end of the file. It's like a tongue. Pardon?
Round one.
Not so much they are round files. Yeah. They're called a rat tail file. Well, that's what I used to call them, a round file, for doing holes, irrigating holes. I fitted some caravan camera to my caravan, and I forgot to allow the hole to be big enough for the plug to go through. I had the one end coming through, and the bigger plug that plugged in didn't have to go through, and it wouldn't fit in. And it took me 2 hours to feed the wires through the internals to get it to where I wanted to go. And there's no way I was going to pull that wire out again to make the hole bigger and then to do it again. So what I did is I got a rat tail file or a round file and just I put a bit of insulation tape around the wire to try and protect it and just rat tailed there's only light aluminium, so it came out, the hole came out okay and it was fine. But yeah, so files can be handy. And they have different purposes, mostly for taking off sharp edges, okay, sharp edges on your steel and that. But that pointy part at the end of the file, as well as saying before, that's quite dangerous. If we're filing away, we get it caught in our wrist. So normally we have a handle on our files. We should have a handle on our files. Do we have handles on our files in our toolboxes? Yeah. We do? We do. And that's why, okay? So are we going to use a file that doesn't have a handle on it for safety reasons? Are we? No. You can say no today, you might do it later, but not meant to.
Wear gloves.
Wear gloves, well, yeah, better not have a handle on it.
Yeah.
Alright. Oh, how come we're talking about, hacksaws? Nearly forgot. Do we all know there's a right way and a wrong way to put a hacksaw blade on your hacksaw? Okay, which way, if you look at the handle, you've got a handle. Does everyone know what a hacksaw looks like?
Yes.
Have you got any experience with being new? Have you got any experience with what I'm talking about? Hacksaw? Yeah, so you're familiar with those things. The hacksaw's got the handle here, and it's got a bar and comes around, and you put the blade in the bottom. Which way are the teeth going to face, in or out from the handle?
Out.
Any takers on out?
Any takers?
Any takers on me?
Any takers?
No takers?
Oh, no takers.
Well, Abby's right. You always have the teeth facing out. If you have the teeth facing in, every time you pull back, it's going to cut. Every time you pull forward, it's not. You want it the other way around. We want to cut on the forward motion. The other thing we want to do with the hacksaw is even long strokes. I see so many people just doing short strokes, and you wear the blade out in the middle, and then at the ends it's still got good teeth. Just go all the way, the blade lasts longer, and it gives you a better cut. And just keep it straight. Sometimes it's hard to cut a very straight line with a hacksaw. It takes a bit of skill, but yeah. But hacksaws, I've seen so often people put the blade in the wrong way. Also, when you're finished with your hacksaw, loosen off the wing nut at the end. Otherwise you're straining the hacksaw and it starts to weaken, and you've got to keep making it tighter and tighter. So just loosen it off when you finish and put it away. Impact guns. Why are we talking about punches, hacksaws, files, now impact guns? Who knows what an impact gun is? What is it?
The drill.
A what?
Drill.
A drill?
Yeah.
No, it's not a drill.
Impact gun used to open tires and all.
Yeah. It's a rattle gun.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's not a drill. but we call them different things. Impact gun, rattle gun, air gun, all those sort of things. And even when you talk air gun, in this presentation, they talk about air gun as an air nozzle, you push to blow air out. So everyone talks different sometimes with what they terminate, what they mean. But my job is just to make sure we all know what we're talking about. A rattle gun, a impact gun. What type of socket do we put on that air gun? Or rattle gun? Or impact gun? What sort of socket do we use? Do we just use our single...
Impact socket.
Sorry?
Impact socket.
Impact socket. So we don't use a normal socket. Otherwise, what happens?
Rounded.
It rounds it off, rounds the nuts off, it wrecks the socket. Okay.
Kunci ka rin. Check.
Bench grinders.
Dapat yan.
See how he's got a glass there to protect his eyes?
Yeah.
Does that mean I don't have to put my safety glasses on because I've got that glass there?
No.
We do, don't we?
Yeah.
See how you can't see on this one, but there's a guard around there. There will be a guard on the other side. In fact, I think that's part of it just there. Some people pull that off. Even I have. Oops, did I say that? But some people pull that off. Do we use that grinder when that guard's pulled off?
No.
We definitely don't, do we? Okay, so it's a safety guard. Why is that guard there? Why do we need that guard?
To protect you if...
To guard you.
Guard me from what?
From the
Flying object.
metal pieces.
Yeah, I think there's another reason. That's only a very brittle stone that we're working with, okay, that grinding wheel. And if that was to shatter, which they could do, it would help catch all those pieces instead of flying out and going and penetrating us.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not a full guarantee, but it's certainly a much safer option, okay? So there's a few reasons why we have a guard there. And we must use the grinder mainly for sharpening tools, screwdrivers. Can we sharpen a tip on a flat-bladed screwdriver on a grinder? Pardon?
No.
Yes, we can.
We can, sir.
We can.
I had a chief engineer before.
You have what, sorry?
I have a boss before.
Yes.
And when he saw a screwdriver, the flat one, that's
Yes.
been
Yes.
it's been bench vice,
Yes.
I bench grinder,
Yes.
he'll throw it away.
All right. Well, I would disagree with your boss. You can grind a screwdriver if you know what you're doing properly. And I've done it many times, okay? Many times. Why would I buy a new screwdriver when I can reshape it again?
Yes.
But you have to be careful you don't overheat it. A bit of coolant, engine coolant, cool it down, don't let it get too hot, or soluble oil is another thing, just to make sure we don't temper the end so that it becomes brittle. But yeah, we can grind it again. We can sharpen drill bits if you've got good eyes. I don't have good eyes now. Once I had reasonable eyes, but not now. So there are tools that can allow you to actually sharpen drill bits that are quite neat. But I can't use a grinder now because my eyesight's gone. But you used to have a technique to do it on the grinding. All right, I'll move on. All right, who's seen this type of a puller? Anyone? So that puller there is a bearing puller. It's I suppose you call it a portable press almost. There is a hydraulic piston in that puller so that it does give you that advantage of hydraulics, so it does when you're undoing something and you've got a bit of force on it, there's more force because of the hydraulic multiplication, I suppose you call it. So yeah, so that there is very handy if you're doing gearboxes, okay? Because some bearings you can't put in a normal press, a bench press. Here's a big bench press. Has everyone seen those and used those?
Yep.
They can be dangerous. Excuse me? They can be dangerous.
Yes, sir, very dangerous.
So how can they be dangerous, Happy?
Huh?
How can a press be dangerous?
Oh, the press.
You want to watch it?
No.
Come up here.
No. So what can happen
Yes.
is if you don't press it properly,
If you don't
break.
set it properly,
It can break.
If you don't want,
if you don't set it properly,
yes,
you can slip and hit
you
it.
can slip and hit
Yes,
you,
you
can't
can
it?
slip and hit you. That's true.
So is it a good idea to have something between? See how they've got a rod there? Is that a good idea?
No.
Probably not a good idea. See, they're using a spacer, I guess you call it.
Oh, space out.
Yeah, it can flick out, particularly if it's not straight. The other thing is you can put too much pressure. That's why there's a gauge there. If it's a good press, so that press will be rated to maybe 40 tonne. I don't know, whatever it is. And we need to be aware of the capacity of that press so we don't over-exert it. Sometimes pressing things up is a bit scary. As you're pressing, all of a sudden it lets go, and it gives you a fright almost. Some are pneumatic, I can't say the word, air operated as well as mechanically. But yeah, watch the gauge. Don't have too long a spacer. Sometimes you've got to have a spacer, but the shorter the safer, okay? And I think there's an assessment question about that, so keep that in mind, all right? Who has air ratchets in their workshop? You do?
Yes.
Okay. They're almost a dying breed, aren't they? Because we've got all these battery-operated tools now. But when we have an air ratchet, we need to be aware of the noise, the factor that we put. Who puts their earmuffs on when we're using air gun or air tools? Anyone? Good answer. Sorry?
Take it.
Sometimes. Continue. No, 2 million.
Anyhow,
This was hanging.
we always need to be mindful that we need to protect our ears,
Yes,
okay? And air tools are very noisy, and compressors are very noisy. So a lot of people have those little tiny plugs they put in their ears, which is
That's
probably
the one I use.
Nice.
all right, you get a point there.
The small ones.
छोटा-छोटा ला use करना छोटा-छोटा use करो
Oh, they're not an air, I said they call it an air gun. They call it a blade gun. Sorry. Or blade gun. I call it an air nozzle. Who cares what you call it, but that's what it is. I've said this many times. Isn't it a good idea? We come to the end of the day, we've got a bit of dust on us, we get the air. That's a good idea, isn't it?
No.
Why?
It can penetrate your stomach.
It can. It can. So, all right. Good answer. What can it cause?
Dead.
Yes. Who wants to die today?
No.
In loss of limb or
All right. We're talking about car hoist. That's another tool, if it's an equipment, I guess, tools and equipment. We need to be aware, and most of us now are aware and work in workshops and aware of the safety factors of a hoist. We need to be careful that the hoist is up to date with its servicing, right? We need to be sure that we've got the vehicle and the hoist properly. We need to be sure that there's no leaks hydraulically in the hoist. Electric hookup, cabling is safe. All those things we always need to be conscious of. We should be always visual of anything that's not right. Even the mountings on these hoists can come loose. We want to be careful of that. 4-post is not as critical, but it still needs to be right. But a 2-post, there's a lot of weight, and the car can come in like that if the bolt's pulled out of the concrete. Also, the thickness of the concrete. If anyone's mounting a car hoist, we need a certain amount of thickness in that concrete to be safe. So all those things play into it. I guess you've got to be careful that, when you're letting the hoist down, there's nothing under the car before you let it down. So many times people have not thought about things and let down on maybe a jack stand or a oil drum or whatever, you know. We don't want anything on the floor before we let the car down, so we make sure everything's clear, okay? All right. I'm going through this pretty quick because I think everyone's pretty in tune with all this. I hope you are. Again, when we're jacking up a car, we need to be jacking it up in the right places. Who did I catch? Probably not in this room, but someone was trying to jack a car up. I think it was, I better not say names, but someone from the class. I put all the smart ones in my class and left all the others for John. I'm just joking. So when we're jacking up a car, when we're jacking up a car, we need to be conscious where we're jacking it. I remember whoever it was. It could have been, whose car was it? Was it your car? It was your car. Someone was going to jack up your car onto somewhere where they shouldn't have, and we stopped them.
I think someone was putting under the radiator.
Under the radiator, yeah, I know it was somewhere. We caught them just before they.
Isaac.
It could have been, but nevertheless, we have to be aware that we're putting the jack where it needs to go. Who thinks a control arm is a good place to jack a car? The control arm underneath the car. Is that a good place or a bad place?
Control arm?
A control arm. Bad place?
Not good.
Okay, sometimes I have to put load on the outer of the control arm so that I can check the ball joint. So sometimes I will have a jack in the jack spot, jack it up, make the stand go right under the very edge near the ball joint as close as I can to the wheel and let it down. I will do that because I'm not leaving it there, but I'm doing it just for a test, right? But generally speaking, we shouldn't jack up on the control arm. Why? Because
It's moving.
one reason. Another reason? Sorry? Damage. How can we damage it?
The rubbers.
Not so much the rubbers. We might bend it, okay? Some cars are very flimsy. Some of these Chinese cars I wouldn't trust to put under control on, would you?
Wow.
But you know, I'm glad that Mohammed's not that anymore. I'd be offending him there, wouldn't I? But no, some metals are weaker and they're getting more stingy when they make things now to make them cheaper and all the rest. It's a weak point. We could bend it, so we have to be careful. If I put the stand right at the end, it's probably unlikely because there's a lot of support with the control arm and the strut or whatever it is. Mind you, a strut, I don't have to do that. The strut just hangs down to check a ball joint. It's more if we've got a double wishbone, which we hardly have anymore in cars, but yeah, very rarely now we need to do that. All right. We also have to be aware where we're going to put our jack stands, that we're going to put them in a safe spot, okay? That normally we would jack up in one spot and probably put the jack stands where the jacking points are on the car if we can. Sometimes we have to jack up on those jacking points, but just to be sure we're putting the jacks where it's not going to do any damage, the jack stands where it's not going to do any damage, okay? We need to be aware we're using proper jack stands that are suitable to take the weight of the vehicle. Even the jack, when we're jacking up, then it's not going to be, if we've got a big truck in our workshop and we're going to use a normal 2-ton jack to jack that truck up, we're not, are we? No, we'll blow the jack up and we'll kill ourselves jacking it up maybe, I don't know. I have a video that I might show you one day. This guy was under a truck. I'm not sure if he had jack stands, but whatever happened, I don't think he could have, the truck fell on him. And it was serious. The actual axle, the axle beam, was about that far off the cement ground and he was in between that. He survived. It was a miracle. And I got the story on video and I might show you one day, but more so to realise accidents can happen. Yeah, very easily. Okay. Fasteners. Why am I talking about fasteners? We're talking about tools. Now I'm talking about fasteners. Why would I be talking about fasteners? Bit out of character, do you think? Or not? What's the correlation between tools and fasteners? How do we do up bolts? How do we do up undo screws?
With tools.
Tools, hey, smart. I told you were the smart one. Hey? So we need to be aware of different types of threads. We need to be aware that, not all threads are the same. Even metric threads have coarse and fine threads. And if we start to screw up a nut that's not, or a bolt into a thread that's wrong, we're going to tear that thread out. We're going to damage that bolt. So we have to be aware of the right threads. We have to be aware of the right. See how we've got different numbers on these?
Yeah.
That's to do with the. Who knows what that is? I'll ask before I tell you. Who knows what that is? What would those numbers represent?
Thread.
Not the thread.
The thickness of the.
Not the thickness. No. Okay. There's a certain amount of. It's happy you'd tell me because I've forgotten the name I'm trying to say. Not torque.
Tension.
Not tension. There's a name.
Tension.
Tensile.
Tensile.
Yeah. So there's some bolts that will be much harder. The metal that they're made out of is much harder, and they're more robust. There's others that are only mild steel. So that tells you how the tense. Can you say the word now?
Tensile.
Tensile. Sorry, that tells you the tensile of the bolt. Okay. Some seatbelt bolts have to be a very high tensile bolt, and if it's not the right tensile, then you run a risk of when that car has an accident. Who's in trouble?
Us.
You're in trouble. Okay. We don't want to get into trouble, do we? Okay.
Us. So you mean to say
Yes.
the numbers on top is the amount of tensile that is in
That's
that
correct. That's correct. Okay.
What is tensile?
Tensile.
Everybody.
Does everyone know what tensile is? It's how
solid it
how
is.
solid, I suppose, is a good word. It's the quality of the bolt, I guess you could say. That bolt's going to be a higher quality if it's a higher tensile. It's going to be stronger, in other words. Less likely to break when you over tighten it. Not that you should over tighten it. If you've got a low tensile bolt and you over tighten it, it'll break. Okay, whereas a high tensile bolt won't break, or it shouldn't break. I probably will. Everything must have their limit.
It's the highest tensile.
Sorry, I always thought it was 8. Pretty sure 8 is, but I could be wrong. Okay,
Most of the time I saw 8.
okay. We've got different types of nuts. We've got, I call that a castellated nut. They call it a slotted hex, but you put a split pin through that to lock that so it won't come loose. A lot of ball joints have a nut like that.
It has a
They've
castle.
got some of them have got nylon lock in the actual nut itself that locks onto the stud. So we have to be aware of that. The other thing we have to be aware of, a lot of bolts there are one-time use bolts, particularly now, or cylinder heads, but also even in some suspension parts, they're just a one-time, and they're a torque type bolt where you torque it to a certain amount of degrees, right? So you might go to maybe, 50 Newton meters, and you might have to go 180 degrees turn or 90 degrees turn or whatever, or you might have to do 90 degrees plus another 90 degrees in a sequence. But these bolts are only one-time use, and they are a stretch bolt, and they're intended to stretch, so they lock when they stretch, okay? But once you've done it once, you can't do it again. You've got to replace the bolts. So if we're dealing with things such as suspension parts or steering parts, and we don't replace them, okay, we're in trouble, aren't we? Because if that bolt comes out, who's going to get the blame for it? Okay? All right, so how do we know which bolts are like that? We have to actually use our vehicle information and specifications, okay, to know. If we don't use our specifications, we don't know, okay? All right, the spare parts place do not tell us that we have to replace the bolt when we buy that suspension part. We're supposed to know it. Okay. Again, washers. We got what's called spring washers or star washers. They are important because they actually lock the nut from coming undone. Also we've got
Crush washer. Yeah, on the drain plug.
what do you call it?
Crush washer.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah, sometimes washers.
Yeah.
We've got flat washers too to actually spread the load when we do up a nut. If we don't put those washers back, we're not professional for the start, and we've actually made that part inferior. It's not, what's the word in? Inferior. We've made that part inferior because it's not holding together like it should because of the fact we've taken that washer and we've left it off. How many people have left the washer off before? None of you.
Washer.
A washer. Have you always put the washer where it's come off of when you see a washer somewhere?
Yeah.
How come when I undo bolts sometimes that someone's worked on a car before and the washer's missing? It's not you guys then. That's good.
Someone threw it.
Also, some people forget to put bolts in things. That annoys me. Frustrates me when someone does that because they're lazy, because it's too hard to get to, or they've forgotten. If you lay all your bolts out, okay, and you have them all together, and then you put everything back together, all the bolts are gone, well, you've obviously put all the bolts back. If you've got a bolt or a washer or anything left in that tray, you know you've left something out, and you've got to find out what that was. So we need systems when we're working on cars so that we don't make those sort of mistakes, okay? Again, here's this kit for what's called a puller, a bearing puller.
Bearing puller.
Very handy if you're doing a lot of transmissions. Who's broken bolts before?
Somebody did.
Who's not honest?
In your car?
I think everyone's broken, but yeah, everyone's broken a bolt. You'd have to not have been working in the industry if you haven't broken a bolt. We learn as we get better. As we learn, we don't break bolts because we are much more careful. Occasionally it might happen, but sometimes someone stretch a bolt and you don't know that and you've done it up normally and it breaks, so that does happen. I think that might have happened in my car, can't remember. But nevertheless, when a bolt breaks, there's a few ways of getting that bolt out. Normally it's a painful way. You've got to drill a hole and you've got to put some sort of stud extractor or bolt extractor. Hello. You're late.
Oh, Isaac never picked me up. I had
That's no excuse, you're late.
I had to walk down from my house.
All right. At least you're here. Thank you. At least you're here. Thank you. Nine foot
Salah.
I'm actually impressed today because last week those that came, and some of you didn't, some of you just didn't come, by the way. No excuse, some of you didn't come. But there was a whole lot that came late, whereas today most of you came on time. Very good, very impressive. All right. Now, where were we? Getting that stud out. We need to use an extractor. Sometimes those studs that are broken, even with the extractor, they won't come out. All right. See what happens when you're late? You gotta get your own chair. I was wondering if you came with some things, but you did have your bag. All right. Has anyone ever tried to extract a broken stud and the extractor has sheared and broken off inside that hole?
Yeah.
Isn't that frustrating?
Yes.
Very frustrating.
How do you get it out when that happens?
Welding.
It's very hard, isn't it? Because this is a very high tensile extractor and it's very hard to drill. Very hard to drill.
The drill wouldn't penetrate on the metal
That's right. That's right.
used on the extractor.
Yeah. So sometimes if I think a bolt's going to be too tight to get out, rather than have the risk of breaking the extractor, I will remove the extractor and I will keep drilling that bolt out and then retap the thread, much safer. But it's important to drill in the middle and to get a center punch and drill in the middle, but it's also important to have the drill straight. And sometimes when you're drilling, it's very hard for you who's looking down to know that it's not like that or like that. So I generally get someone else to actually eye off the drill and just make sure it's straight when you've got to do something. If you've got a drill press, it's different, but if you've got something on the car that you can't just take out and put in the drill press, then you're going to use a drill and keep that drill bit straight. Okay? All right, and don't over drill the hole. If you over drill the hole, you won't be able to retap the thread. But if the bolt isn't too tight in there, yes, use the extractor. Just put a small hole in and extract it out. All right. There's also stud removing tools. I don't know if we've covered that, but they're like a bit more bulkier. So you've got a stud which is sticking out like that, not so much a bolt, just a thread part, and we can put this tool in, it grips the thread and undoes it. But often I just lock two nuts together and I can undo the thread if they're not too tight. So yeah. All right. Oh, there's the stud extractor. There we go. So we do have one in there, but we're removing a stud. And it's like got a cam on it. So as you turn that cam comes around and locks onto the stud, and it's got teeth on it, and it just grips the stud and you unscrew it. There's certain amounts of sealers and adhesives that are on the market for pulling something apart and we want to seal up something. A lot of gaskets now are gone by the board, and we use sealants, chemical gaskets now. We don't need to use paper gaskets like we used to, but sometimes we do. But yeah, there are so many different sealants and adhesives available on the market. It's very important to use the correct sealant for the task at hand. Some sealants are ideal for exhaust systems and can handle high temperature, and others may need to be flexible and allow for some movement and some heat expansion or vibration. Special sealants can be purchased from special sealants can be purchased for thread sealing. So we've got Loctite. Have you all heard of Loctite?
Yeah.
So that's another way of locking a nut up using a chemical like a Loctite, okay? So yeah, there's that. Got to be careful of some sealants because they affect oxygen sensors. So, for example, some silicons, if we use on some of the exhaust bolts or whatever, get into the exhaust system and get onto that oxygen sensor, it can affect the way that sensor works. So yeah, we do have to be aware of what we're using. But anyhow, so tools and equipment that are required for the task. So I've always said to you, don't ever start a job that you don't have the right tools for. I've said that before, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it again. So often people don't think, and they get into this job, oh, how am I going to support this timing chain, or how am I going to do this? And we don't have the right tool. Work out what tools you need before you do the job. How do you work out what tools do you need? Anyone got any idea?
Manufacturer's manual.
Yes. So a lot of aftermarket data suppliers will tell us that, and even say for timing belts or timing chains, will give us the breakdown of what tools we need, okay? Sometimes there's certain tools we can get away with not having, but don't shortcut yourself by thinking you can get away with it if you're not sure. I'd rather you not do it. When I was overseas, my staff rung me up. They had a certain car that came in that was a European car, and we didn't have the tools to do the timing belt, the timing chain. Had I been there, I might have gone ahead with the job because I can hire tools from Melbourne. I knew I could hire them. But it was a type of car that was a one-off car. It wasn't worth me buying the toolkit for a one-off job. So I pulled the pin on that and said to the staff, don't worry, just refer them to such and such a place who specialise in those vehicles, which he did. I don't normally do that, but I certainly wasn't going to take a job on it if we didn't have the right tools. Okay. Vehicle, yeah, we've pretty much covered all that. An experienced technician will be able to gather the correct spanners for the task just by looking at the bolt heads. Who can look at a bolt head and know you need a 12mm spanner?
Still working.
Still working on that?
19 and 17 is almost not like this.
Yeah. Well, as you get more and more, Shushan, do you need to get all your tools and keep trying them, or do you know which, say, a 70mm spanner by looking at the bolt? You do, don't you? You get used to it. So yeah, experience will help. Okay. Before using any power tools, check the guard. See that one? Am I going to use that angle grinder?
No,
Why am I going to use that?
it has no guard.
Has no guard.
Yes.
Exactly. Why is it important to have a guard? Why is it important to have a guard?
So when it breaks, the guard will stop it. You know
That's right.
what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. It won't go through your throat. Okay. Plus, it also helps to direct the
Yes.
filings in one direction. Who's going to use that without wearing their safety glasses?
How's this it?
What are you going to put on how are you going to protect yourself when you use this angle grinder? Apart from the guard, assuming the guard's on it and you're about to use it, your safety glasses.
Yes,
Perfect.
only guard is here.
Okay.
Only raincoat.
So, see how we got a coil here?
Helmet pen.
We're using an electric grinder and we've got a coil like that. What are we going to do?
Huh?
There you go.
Oh,
Sorry?
Tag out.
Take out. Take out.
Tag out.
take
Take out.
take out.
What's the word for take out? Which is
Take
Take,
Tag.
take. Yeah. And what else are we going to do?
Report.
Report. And what else are we going to do?
Throw it in the bin.
No, not.
What's the word I use when we take it out of service? We're going to isolate.
Isolate.
So those are the three words that your assessment will expect you to know. So we'll keep on that. But yeah. I was doing some woodwork. It was just before I went to Western Australia. I was rushing. I was cutting this block of wood for some reason, and it was getting on to dark, and I was rushing, and all of a sudden it all stopped. I cut through the power cord.
Oh no.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's a trip in the safety switch that just switched off. Fortunately, I didn't get electrocuted.
Yeah.
But I'm normally very careful. Even hang cords around my neck just to get them out of the road. But these days, most tools now, we don't need to worry about power cords because they're all hopefully battery operated, which is great. All right. So we must put all our tools away neatly. We must have easy access to our tools when we're working on a job. Bring your toolbox to your job if you can. Have everything around you so that it makes it easy to get to and you've got clear access to your tool. There's questions in your assessment about having clear access to your tools. Just be aware you have to have clear access for your tools. Okay, make sure we clean our tools, make sure we put them back. Make sure we are responsible that all the tools are back where they are. Back in the workshop, we always look at the toolbox to make sure no tools have been left out. And we don't want to lose tools, they're expensive, okay? So I'm not going to read all that, but it's all there, pretty common sense stuff that you all know. And most technicians will have their own tools, so be responsible for your own tools. It's funny how when you own your own tools, you are responsible, but when it's the workshop's tools, often you're not. Okay, and what else? Clearly name your tools. If you want to, do you mark your tools, or do you just know that they're your tools?
Mark it.
You do mark them? Yeah, good idea. Yeah. All right. There's another bearing pulling kit. There's a few different types, aren't there? And who knows what that is?
Marking tool.
It is. It is. Guess what? Let's go.
All right.
All right. Guys, stand up for a minute. We'll turn this off.
Ready?